Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us into the strange and beautiful workings of your own mind, into the quiet chambers of the brain, and the question that hums softly at the centre of every thought: who or what is really in control? But before you settle in and get cozy, I'd love if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you truly find these quiet explorations enjoyable. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always a small wonder to see how far this gentle circle of curiosity reaches, each of us awake in our own little moment of time, scattered across the planet like stars. Now, feel free to dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a soft background hum, and let's begin our quiet journey into the brain together. And if your mind begins to wander, that's perfectly fine. Let it drift. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story. It's late, and your mind feels full, though you're not sure of what exactly. Somewhere behind the curtain of awareness, billions of tiny sparks are trading messages, weaving together the next word you'll think, the next breath you'll take, the next small impulse to adjust the pillow beneath your head. And yet, you don't tell them to. They simply happen, quietly, obediently, like musicians in an orchestra that never stops playing, even when the conductor's long since fallen asleep. Your brain is 3 pounds of soft matter, but inside it are about 90 billion neurons, tiny messengers that hum with electricity. They pass faint signals to one another, not through sound or speech, but through little pulses of energy, more delicate than the click of a watch gear. If we could hear it, consciousness might sound like a whispering forest at night, each leaf passing on a secret to the next. Most of what your brain does never reaches your awareness. It keeps your heart beating, your lungs gently expanding, your blood warm and steady. Even as you listen now, your pupils are adjusting to the light, your fingers shift slightly to keep balance, your muscles relax in slow waves. You're doing hundreds of things, but only 1 or 2 make it into your story of me. The rest, well, they belong to the unseen orchestra beneath your thoughts. There's something humbling about realizing that much of you runs on autopilot. You can walk while thinking of something else entirely, or type sentences while your mind drifts somewhere far away. When you reach home and realize you don't remember half the route you took, that isn't forgetfulness, it's efficiency. Your brain is a master of delegation. Once it learns a task, it hands it over to the unconscious, freeing your awareness for other things, like daydreaming, planning dinner, or wondering quietly who exactly is steering all this. The truth is, there isn't a single captain inside your skull. No throne room, no little person behind your eyes pulling levers. Instead, there's a network, a living city of cells that communicate, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in quiet disagreement. When you move your hand, dozens of regions collaborate, some handling motion, others sensation, still others memory, attention, and emotion. It's less like a military command and more like jazz, spontaneous, cooperative, sometimes a little unpredictable, but beautiful in its timing. Imagine for a moment that your thoughts are like music drifting from many instruments. The flute might be your imagination, light and wandering. The cello, your emotions, deep, resonant, slow to fade. The percussion, your senses, striking steady rhythms from the world around you. What you experience as you is the harmony they create together. Scientists sometimes call this integration, but we don't need the word tonight. Think of it instead as coordination, as an intricate dance of signals, finding just the right balance. When the dancers move together, we feel awake, present, whole. When they fall out of rhythm, we drift into dreams or into confusion. The difference between those states may not be a wall, but a shimmer, a slight change in how the music is played. Even now as you listen, Parts of your brain are already predicting what comes next. It's how language feels so natural. Your neurons are a half second ahead of every word, anticipating, correcting, adjusting. You're not consciously deciding to understand the sentence. Your mind is doing it for you. In fact, by the time you realize you've understood something, your brain has already finished the job. This discovery, that thought itself may be a performance rehearsed before awareness arrives, has fascinated neuroscientists for decades. Some experiments show that decisions form a few moments before we become aware of making them. That sounds strange, but it fits what we feel every day. You don't choose to like a melody, you just realize that you do. You don't decide to be startled by thunder. It happens, and then you explain it to yourself. But this doesn't mean you're powerless. It means control is shared, distributed across a quiet democracy of signals, sensations, and memories. Your conscious mind is more like the narrator of a film than the director. It tells the story of what's already unfolding, gives it shape, makes it feel coherent, and in doing so, it keeps you grounded. It keeps you, you. If we could look at this process under a microscope, there would be no moment where a single spark declares, "Now I am in charge." Instead, there would be millions of tiny conversations, like murmurs in a crowd, agreeing just enough to move together. Out of that collective murmur rises the feeling of will, the subtle sense that, I meant to do this. And maybe that's the most delicate illusion of all. The orchestra's melody convincing the conductor that it needs him, when in truth, it has been playing beautifully all along. Perhaps the next time you find yourself doing something automatically, reaching for your phone, stirring your tea, brushing your teeth without thinking, you might pause, just for a moment, to appreciate the quiet miracle beneath it all, the symphony that never sleeps, the hidden intelligence that keeps you breathing through the night. And as we drift further into the story, we'll step into that orchestra's rehearsal space, into the strange half-light of sleep, where control fades and the body keeps moving on its own. When night arrives and the lights fade, the orchestra of your brain doesn't stop playing. It simply changes tempo. Each note slows, each instrument softens, as if the entire city of neurons were dimming its windows one by one. You drift into sleep believing that your mind has gone quiet. But deep inside, there are still distant corridors where footsteps echo. Parts of you remain awake, tending to their duties in the dark. Somewhere between deep sleep and waking lies a curious state, a place where the lines between action and dream begin to blur. This is the world of the sleepwalker. To see it clearly, imagine a person rising in the stillness of night, eyes open but expression blank. They walk, speak, sometimes even cook or paint, all while fast asleep. When morning comes, they remember nothing. It sounds eerie, but what's happening is not possession or mystery. It's physiology, a beautiful, if slightly mischievous glitch in the system. During most of deep sleep, the parts of the brain that plan, decide, and judge, particularly the prefrontal regions near the front of the head, take their rest. They are like the managers of a great company turning off their computers for the night. But the maintenance crew, the motor areas, the balance centers, and even the visual systems sometimes keep working. And so the factory hums along without its supervisors, following scripts written long ago. If you could see a sleepwalker's brain activity translated into sound, it might resemble a lullaby mixed with sudden bursts of percussion. Most waves would be slow and deep, the rhythm of deep rest, but now and then a cluster of neurons would leap awake, sparking quick flurries of motion. It's this strange overlap, where part of the brain is asleep and part is awake, that lets a body move without awareness. Doctors who study sleepwalking often describe it as a split state. One part of the mind dreaming, another quietly acting. It's as if the orchestra forgot who's conducting and begins to improvise. The limbs remember how to walk, the eyes can open and guide, even speech patterns can emerge, though usually as murmurs and fragments. What's missing is the watchful presence that normally says, "Wait, why am I doing this?" One man once painted perfect geometric shapes on his kitchen wall in the middle of the night. Another baked bread, using flour he had measured and stored while half conscious. When shown the results, they were baffled, amused, sometimes embarrassed, but mostly amazed that their bodies could carry out such precise acts in a state so close to dreaming. It's a reminder that you, the self you recognize, might not be the only one steering the wheel, and yet there is grace in this hidden continuity. Even without conscious command, the body's systems collaborate beautifully. Muscles, senses, and reflexes all keep their roles. The nervous system becomes a caretaker, protecting you from harm. Most sleepwalkers avoid obstacles instinctively, as if guided by an invisible memory of their surroundings. The intelligence of the body continues to hum, performing its nocturnal ballet. If consciousness could watch itself in that moment, it might whisper, "See, I was never the only one in charge." The prefrontal regions, the ones often called the decision makers, are silent, but elsewhere, ancient circuits keep time. It's the same network that moves your hand away from a hot stove before you realize it's hot. The same one that steadies your balance when you stumble. Even asleep, the orchestra knows the score. Of course, this fragile harmony can misfire. A sleepwalker might speak nonsense or wander into danger, confused between the dream and the room around them. That's when the absence of conscious oversight shows its cost. Awareness, though small compared to the brain's total power, adds the final ingredient, intention. It's what ties motion to meaning. Without it, action becomes pure pattern, beautiful but empty of context. Still, we shouldn't think of sleepwalking as a malfunction. It's a glimpse into how layered the mind truly is. Awareness doesn't switch off like a light. It fades like the sun setting through clouds, leaving pockets of brightness behind. Somewhere deep within, your brain is always balancing between states, sleep and wake, reason and reflex. You are not one thing at a time, you're a constellation flickering in and out of awareness. There's a curious comfort in that. When you lie down to rest, you hand over the reins to a part of yourself that never tires. As your conscious thoughts dissolve, the hidden caretaker steps forward, keeping your heartbeat steady, your breathing smooth, your muscles relaxed. You drift, but the orchestra continues. Its tempo slows, its melody deepens, but the music doesn't end. Scientists have tried to map the precise boundary where control fades. They place soft sensors along the scalp, listening to the murmurs of brainwaves. What they see is not a sudden cut, but a gradual blending. Faster ripples giving way to slow, rolling waves. When someone sleepwalks, a brief spark appears in the midst of that calm sea. A sudden burst of faster waves signals partial awakening, but not enough to summon awareness. It's like lightning flashing behind closed eyes. You might think of it as a window between two worlds. On one side, the deep ocean of sleep, on the other, the bright shore of wakefulness. A sleepwalker drifts through the mist between them, guided by instincts older than language. It's a strange in-between place, a reminder that consciousness is not an on and off switch, but a spectrum, shimmering with shades of awareness. And in a way, all of us live our days that way, half conscious in our routines, half dreaming through our decisions. We pour coffee while thinking of tomorrow. We drive while remembering yesterday. Parts of us are awake, others quietly resting. The miracle isn't that sleepwalkers move in the dark. It's that we all do, every day, in our own subtle ways. So the next time you find yourself lost in thought, doing something without quite knowing why, you might smile and think of your nocturnal twin, the sleepwalker within you who keeps moving even when the mind has stepped aside. Consciousness, it seems, is less a light bulb and more a dawn, It rises slowly, touching each corner in its time, and if we follow that faint glow further, it leads us toward another threshold, one even deeper than sleep. A place where awareness fades entirely, not from fatigue but from chemistry. The silent realm of anesthesia, where the orchestra finally pauses and even the conductor's dream goes still. Imagine a hospital room late at night, soft light glinting off metal instruments, a quiet rhythm of beeping monitors in the background. The air hums with anticipation, calm but full of purpose. A patient lies still on the table, wrapped in a blue sheet, eyes open but serene. Around her, a small team prepares for the moment when she will be gently carried into the deep, measured stillness of anesthesia. It begins almost invisibly. A cool sensation runs up her arm where the clear tube meets the skin. A nurse whispers something kind, the sort of words that stay half heard, half felt. Within seconds, her eyelids grow heavy. The world narrows to the sound of her own breathing. Then, without alarm or warning, awareness simply fades. The lights of the mind dim, not one by one, but all at once, like a city losing power in a silent storm. To the doctors, this moment is routine, but to consciousness itself, it's a small miracle, or perhaps a small vanishing. For all of recorded history, humans have tried to understand what happens when awareness disappears. Is it sleep? Is it death's rehearsal? Or something entirely different? The answer, as it turns out, lies not in the darkness itself, but in the faint electrical music that underlies it. When scientists place gentle sensors along the scalp, a method that listens to the faint whispers of electrical rhythm, they can see the difference between wakefulness and anesthesia unfold in real time. When you're awake, the patterns look lively and complex. Fast ripples, quick exchanges, the sound of a bustling market where information moves freely. But as the anesthetic flows through your blood, those ripples begin to slow. Communication between different parts of the brain grows faint, like neighbourhoods losing contact across a city. The chatter softens into one long synchronised hum. And then, quite suddenly, the conversation stops. The vast network that was once a buzz with crosstalk, from vision to memory, emotion to reasoning, falls silent. The brain itself does not die, nor does it stop working. It simply loses its rhythm of connection. It is still there, every cell alive and healthy, but no longer playing together. As one anesthesiologist once said, "You can have all the instruments in the orchestra, but if they don't listen to each other, there is no music." There is a structure deep in the brain, small, shaped like two halves of a walnut, that acts as the switchboard for this symphony. It sits right in the centre, quietly connecting signals from the senses to the rest of the brain. When it's active, it helps keep the conversation flowing, sight to memory, sound to language, touch to movement. But when anaesthetic drugs slow its activity, those connections weaken. Messages still arrive, but they're never fully delivered. It's as if the lines are busy, and every voice goes unheard. To describe this process in symbols would miss its quiet beauty. It's not a formula or a code, it's a rhythm. Consciousness fades when this rhythm flattens into simplicity, when the diverse chatter of 1,000 regions merges into a single note. Awareness, it seems, is the harmony that emerges only when the brain's many voices remain distinct yet connected. In a way, anesthesia gives us a rare glimpse of what consciousness is not. It shows that awareness isn't contained in a single spot, not a light hidden in one corner of the skull. It's the conversation itself, the way one signal answers another, the way patterns braid together and change with every heartbeat. When that communication stops, the story of you pauses. When it returns, the story resumes. And then, eventually, the lights begin to flicker back on. Somewhere between 2 and 4 hours later, the same sensors that once saw a slow ocean of waves begin to capture faster ripples again. Connections reform. One by one, the neighbourhoods of the mind come back online. The faint hum of unity returns to a polyphony of distinct voices. The patient stirs, eyes fluttering, the room's sounds returning to her like echoes from a dream. If we could see that awakening as colour, it would look like dawn spreading over a quiet city. Not an explosion, but a gradual illumination. Each part of the brain, like a street lamp, flickers on at its own pace until the landscape of consciousness is bright once more. To the patient, it feels like no time has passed. I was here, she might say, and then suddenly I was here again. But between those two moments lies a blank, a perfect absence, as if time itself had been paused. What's extraordinary is that this pause feels seamless. The brain forgets the gap, stitching its before and after together without noticing the void in between. Perhaps that's one of consciousness's oldest tricks, to protect its own illusion of continuity. In a sense, anesthesia lets us witness the brain's ability to stop the movie, freeze the frame, and start again, all without losing the feeling of being the same person. There's something gentle in that idea. Awareness isn't fragile because it disappears. It's resilient because it can return, because it knows how to rebuild itself from silence. The same network that once hummed itself to sleep finds its rhythm again, as if memory itself remembers how to be alive. Maybe that's what consciousness truly is. Not a thing, but a balance. A dance between silence and sound, order and chaos, stillness and motion. When the connections hum in harmony, awareness arises like a melody. When they fall out of sync, the music fades, yet the instruments remain, waiting for the cue to begin again. And so, the patient opens her eyes. The lights overhead are bright, the world sharp and clear. She looks around and smiles, not realizing she has just crossed one of the strangest frontiers a human being can traverse, the temporary vanishing of the self. In a few moments she'll joke with a nurse, perhaps ask how long the surgery took. The answer will surprise her. Just a few hours. To her it will feel like an instant. If we follow that instant a little further, the trail leads us into the shimmering edge between awareness and absence, a place where consciousness doesn't fully vanish but gently reconfigures. The fragile switch between worlds, where sleep, anesthesia, fainting, and dreaming all meet, waiting to remind us that control was never a single light to be turned on or off, but a constellation that must stay in tune. There's a strange moment that exists between sleep and waking, a soft, flickering instant when you aren't entirely sure which world you belong to. Your body is heavy, but your mind drifts in gentle half-thoughts. A sound reaches you, a distant hum, the creak of a chair, a bird calling outside, and something deep inside begins to stir. Awareness rises, slow and uncertain, like fog lifting from a lake at dawn. It's here, in this delicate space between light and shadow, that consciousness reveals its true nature, not as a simple switch, but as a fragile balance. We often speak of being awake or asleep as if they were clear, separate states. But the brain is far more nuanced. In truth, awareness moves on a gradient, sliding between degrees of light and dark like the dimmer of a lamp. Sleep, dreams, anesthesia, fainting. They're all variations of the same rhythm. Connection, disconnection, and reconnection among the brain's countless networks. Each state has its own melody, its own pulse of communication. When those rhythms sync, awareness blooms. When they drift apart, the sense of self gently dissolves. In this view, the thalamus, that small walnut-shaped structure deep within the brain, acts like an old-fashioned telephone operator plugging and unplugging connections between different rooms of the mind. When it's active, the world gets through. The sound of a voice, the glint of sunlight, the weight of your hand against a cup, all of it reaches the conscious theatre, ready to be noticed. But when the thalamus quiets, those incoming calls stop being patched through. The world doesn't vanish exactly. It just stops being announced. During anesthesia, for example, this switchboard goes almost completely silent. Signals still arrive at the edges of the brain, sounds, touches, vibrations, but without that central hub coordinating the message, awareness cannot assemble the picture. You might say that the orchestra keeps playing, but each section can no longer hear the others. The violins play alone, the flutes wander off, the drums beat without pattern. The harmony that once formed you has scattered into fragments. Yet even in that scattered state, something lingers. Some tiny part of the system still keeps track of time, of heartbeat, of balance. And when the signal begins to hum again, when the thalamus reconnects its lines and the chatter among regions returns, awareness floods back in, all at once. The music reunites, the lights flare softly, and the self remembers how to exist. Fainting too is part of this spectrum. A sudden drop in blood pressure, a flash of emotion, a moment of shock, and the delicate coordination of signals falters. The orchestra stumbles. Awareness slips away, but only for a breath. When balance returns, so does consciousness. Like a film unpausing after a skipped frame. You may feel as though you were gone for minutes, but to the brain, it was the briefest of intermissions. Even dreaming belongs to this continuum. When you dream, certain networks fall quiet while others light up in vivid patterns. Your prefrontal regions, the ones that question and plan, take a rest, while emotional and visual areas awaken, weaving tapestries of impossible worlds. You become both storyteller and audience, drifting through landscapes your waking mind could never design. And when you wake, those stories evaporate almost instantly, like breath on glass. These states, sleep, dreaming, fainting, anesthesia, may seem separate, but they're woven together by the same thread: communication. Consciousness depends on dialogue, on a constant exchange of information among many regions of the brain. When that dialogue becomes scattered or one-sided, awareness fades. When it synchronizes again, the self reappears. It's tempting to think of control as something that can be held. A firm grip on the reins, a button you can press to stay awake, a steady hand on the wheel. But the more we learn, the clearer it becomes that control is more like balance than command. The self is not a ruler sitting on a throne. It's a dance among partners, a collaboration that can be interrupted at any time and then quietly restored. Maybe that's why fainting, sleep, and anesthesia can feel so similar. That soft falling away from the world, followed by a sudden, gentle return. In each case, the orchestra pauses just long enough to remind you that its song is fragile. A few misplaced notes, a few missed connections, and awareness flickers like a candle in the wind. Still, it always returns. Even when you lose consciousness, your body's quieter systems keep watch. Your heart keeps its rhythm. Your lungs keep their slow tides of air. Deep inside, ancient circuits continue their silent duties, keeping the rest of you safe until the conductor steps back onto the stage. Perhaps that's what makes this whole process so mysterious, that consciousness can vanish entirely and yet leave no scar. It disappears like a tide receding from the shore, and when it returns, the beach looks the same. The sand remembers the pattern of waves, the shells still lie scattered where they were. You open your eyes, and everything feels continuous. The mind quietly edits out the absence, smoothing the break as though nothing ever stopped. But if we linger on that thought for a moment, another question arises. If consciousness depends so completely on connection, what happens when the connection isn't just slowed or silenced, but divided? When the two halves of the brain, the twin orchestras that play in perfect synchrony, can no longer hear each other at all? That's not a poetic question. It's a real one, answered in part by the patients who once underwent a rare kind of surgery to treat severe seizures. For them, the bridge between the left and right hemispheres, a thick bundle of fibres carrying millions of signals every second, was cut, and what they experienced afterward reshaped everything we thought we knew about the self. From here, the story opens into the strange world of the divided brain, A world where two minds can live quietly in one skull, and the illusion of unity must be stitched together by imagination alone. Picture the brain as a glowing planet divided by a river of light, its two continents forever joined by a thin silver bridge. On one side, language and logic build cities of order. On the other, intuition and image bloom like wild forests. They live in constant communication, trading stories, emotions, and memories across that bridge of shining fibers. Together, they create the illusion of one seamless world, a single you. But what happens if that bridge is cut? It's a question that was first answered not by philosophers, but by surgeons, and by the remarkable people who once suffered seizures so violent they threatened their lives. In the mid-20th century, doctors discovered that by severing the thick cable connecting the two halves of the brain, a bundle known simply as the corpus callosum, they could stop seizures from jumping from one hemisphere to the other. It was an act of both necessity and curiosity. The results were astonishing. The patients recovered, the seizures stopped, but their inner worlds had quietly changed. The bridge was gone, and suddenly the two hemispheres had to live side by side like polite neighbours who no longer share a phone line. To understand how profound this was, imagine sitting before a screen. For a brief moment, a single word flashes to your left, so quickly that only the right half of your brain, the one that cannot speak, sees it. When asked what you saw, your lips form the natural answer: nothing. Yet when you're given a pencil in your left hand, that same hand begins to draw, not randomly, but precisely what the unseen word described. This happened with a man named Joe. The word Texas was shown to the left side of his visual field, reaching only his right hemisphere. His speaking mind, on the left, knew nothing. "I didn't see anything," he said. But when handed a pencil, his left hand began sketching a cowboy hat. The right side of his brain, unable to speak, still understood and answered the question in its own quiet way. The scientist watching him could only stare in wonder. Here, in front of them, was proof that there could be two separate centres of awareness coexisting under one skull. The left hemisphere was articulate, rational, often convinced it understood everything. The right was mute, emotional, rich with perception but poor with words. They were like twins sharing a single body, each with its own secrets, and yet most of the time these two worlds cooperated beautifully. In ordinary life, even split-brain patients appeared entirely normal. They could hold conversations, laugh, cook, read, and recognize faces. The division only revealed itself in rare, carefully crafted moments. Those flickering instants when the world spoke differently to each side. If this seems alien, think of smaller versions of it that happen every day. You tie your shoes while thinking of something else entirely. You reach for a cup before you realise you are thirsty. Your hands seem to know what to do before words arrive to explain. Maybe you've driven home from work only to realise you don't remember a single turn. That, in miniature, is a split mind at work. Action and awareness taking turns in the same theatre. Scientists found that in split-brain patients, the left hemisphere, the side that controls speech, often invented explanations for things it hadn't truly decided. When a patient's right hemisphere was shown a command to stand up, his body obeyed. Asked why, his left hemisphere, unaware of the hidden message, calmly replied, "Oh, I just wanted to stretch my legs." It wasn't lying. It was simply improvising, eager to keep the story of self intact. It's a little humbling, isn't it? To realise that the storyteller in your head may be more narrator than ruler. Your brain doesn't like gaps in logic or memory, so it fills them in instantly, smoothing the rough edges of reality. It's as if there's a voice inside that refuses to admit, "I don't know." Instead it says, "Of course, that was my plan all along." In a sense, we all live as split minds. Not because our brains are cut, but because they're crowded. Emotions pull one way, reasoning another. Habit says yes, curiosity says no. The miracle is that we rarely notice the conflict. The bridge still holds. Messages flow so fast and so constantly that disagreement dissolves before it reaches the surface. The self we experience, that calm, singular I, is not the voice of one region, but the chorus of many. There's beauty in this cooperation. The left hemisphere gives language its shape and reason its steps. The right hemisphere paints feeling and intuition across the edges. One half builds structure, the other makes it sing. Together they create a harmony we call consciousness. But when the bridge between them is cut, the harmony divides into two melodies. Still beautiful, but independent. One may hum a tune the other cannot hear. Yet, even then, they find ways to collaborate, like pianists sharing a bench, one hand playing treble, the other bass. Some split-brain patients, when asked to complete tasks, discovered that their hands worked together instinctively, even though each side of the brain had its own intention. The unity remained in the act itself, even when understanding had split in two. Perhaps you felt that kind of unspoken coordination too, when your body does something perfectly before your mind catches up. The quiet precision of catching a falling glass, or the way your fingers find the right keys on a piano, even as you think of something else. These moments are reminders that there are many voices within you harmonizing without words. And so, what these surgeries revealed wasn't a flaw, but a truth long hidden in plain sight, that the sense of one unified self is a creation, a negotiation between partners. The illusion of control isn't weakness, it's the stitching that keeps the fabric of identity from unraveling. Perhaps late at night, when your thoughts feel divided, one part calm, another restless, you can think of those two hemispheres still whispering to each other, still trading tiny sparks across their bridge of light. Even when your mind feels torn between reason and emotion, language and silence, both sides are part of the same quiet miracle, a divided world that never forgets how to be one. And as we drift further into that quiet unity, our exploration now turns toward the voice that holds these halves together. The part of the brain that can't stop explaining, inventing and stitching all the fragments of experience into one seamless narrative. The interpreter, the storyteller within the skull. There's a small, persistent voice inside your head that never seems to rest. It comments on everything, explains everything, turns chaos into meaning before you've even noticed there was confusion to begin with. When you trip on the sidewalk, it rushes to defend you. I meant to do that. When you forget someone's name, it assures you that you were just distracted. It smooths the wrinkles of your day, patches holes in your memory, and builds a steady, continuous story of me. That voice, gentle and persuasive, is the storyteller of the brain, sometimes called the interpreter. It lives mostly in the left hemisphere, where language finds its home, but you don't have to know its location to feel its presence. It's the quiet narrator turning your life into a film that makes sense, even when it doesn't. In those split-brain studies, researchers discovered something remarkable about this inner narrator. When the left hemisphere was separated from the right, it didn't stop talking. It simply filled the silence with imagination. If the right side made the body act for reasons the left couldn't see, the interpreter would invent an explanation on the spot. A patient might be shown a simple command to his right hemisphere. Say, "Stand up." His body would obey, rising from the chair without hesitation. When asked why he'd done it, his left hemisphere, unaware of the hidden message, replied without missing a beat, "Oh, I wanted to stretch my legs. It wasn't a lie." The brain believed it. It was simply maintaining the narrative. This, it turns out, is what your interpreter does all day long. It connects the dots of your experience so seamlessly that you rarely realize the dots were separate to begin with. You think of an old song and suddenly remember a childhood friend. You take a shortcut on the way home, not knowing why, and later discover traffic was heavy on your usual route. You smile at a stranger and feel lighter without knowing what changed. Later, your mind ties these threads into a neat little bow. I must have felt nostalgic, or I just had a good feeling. The explanations arrive after the act, like subtitles added to a film that's already playing. It's easy to laugh at this, to imagine the interpreter as a compulsive chatterer, making up excuses for a brain that doesn't need them. But in truth, it's a masterpiece of adaptation. Without this inner storyteller, life would feel fragmented, a series of unrelated events with no sense of continuity. The interpreter keeps us sane by making the world coherent, even if that coherence is sometimes invented. Think of how you wake from a dream. At first, the fragments make no sense. A hallway, a cat that speaks, a door that opens onto the sky. Within seconds of waking, the mind begins to edit. The images fade, the story solidifies, and you tell yourself, I dreamed something strange, but it was just a dream. The interpreter has stepped in again, translating chaos into narrative. It does this not only for dreams, but for everything. When you misremember a conversation, it fills in the missing lines with the tone or feeling that seems right. When two memories blur together, it quietly rewrites them so they align. It would rather be confidently wrong than quietly uncertain. There's a kind of tender comedy in that. The mind's need to save face before itself. But there's also poetry. The same mechanism that explains away mistakes also gives us imagination. The ability to weave stories, to create art, to search for meaning, all sprout from this same root. The storyteller within doesn't just invent, it empathizes, it rehearses, it dreams of possibilities. Even when you think you're being objective, the interpreter hums beneath the surface, selecting details that fit the plot. You might notice, for instance, only the things that confirm your expectations. The friend who's always late, the colour of the sky when you're sad. That's not bias alone, it's narrative gravity. The brain bends facts toward the story it's already telling. Scientists sometimes call this tendency confabulation, but that word feels too cold. It suggests deceit, when really it's self-protection. The mind wants to live in a world that makes sense, even if it must paint over the cracks. Every day, countless tiny brushstrokes of interpretation keep your sense of self intact, so seamlessly that you never see the repairs. And yet, this same storyteller can lead you astray. It can cling too tightly to its narrative, refusing to admit when reality has changed. It can trap you inside explanations that no longer fit. Think of arguments where each person clings to their version of events, both utterly sincere. Each interpreter is doing its best, keeping the world coherent from its own vantage point. The truth, somewhere in between, is not a single line, but a tapestry woven from both perspectives. Still, without the interpreter, you wouldn't recognize yourself at all. The left hemisphere's words, the right hemisphere's emotions, the body's instincts, all need a translator to turn their noise into a song. It's this voice that tells you a single ongoing story. I am the same person who woke up this morning. I am the same person who loved, who feared, who chose. Without that thread, consciousness would scatter like beads from a broken necklace. Perhaps you've experienced moments when the storyteller falters. Déjà vu, for instance, when the interpreter briefly mislabels the present as a memory, or when you walk into a room and forget why, leaving your narrative mid-sentence. These small hiccups remind us how delicate the stitching is. The story can glitch, but it quickly mends itself. The orchestra resumes. So we forgive the interpreter for its embellishments. After all, it's not trying to fool us. It's trying to hold us together. It's the quiet author of your continuity, composing a narrative as comforting as it is illusory. Without it, you would wake each morning to a world that feels unfamiliar. With it, the self becomes a steady flame burning through the flicker of experience. The next time you catch yourself explaining an impulse, why you turned left instead of right, While you laughed at something small, you might smile at the thought that your inner narrator is hard at work again, tidying up the script. Not every line will be true, but every one of them will be sincere. And if we follow that sincerity further, it leads us to a deeper realization that the brain's two sides, even when separated, find ways to cooperate. Through gestures, through habits, through the quiet choreography of daily life. They keep the story intact, two minds still moving as one. That's where our journey drifts next, into the strange, silent conversation between divided halves and the quiet agreements that hold the self together. Imagine sitting at a small table with a sheet of paper before you. On that paper are two simple shapes, a circle and a square. In your right hand, a pencil waits. In your left, another. A soft voice tells you to draw both shapes at once, one with each hand. It sounds easy, doesn't it? But as soon as you begin, the two sides of your body start arguing in silence. Your right hand begins the square, straight lines and corners. Your left hand drifts toward a curve. They cross paths, interfere, mimic each other's rhythm. The more you try to control them both, the more tangled the shapes become. It's like trying to hum one melody while whistling another. Now imagine what it would be like if each hand truly acted on its own, not just clumsily, but independently. That's what scientists discovered when they met people whose two brain hemispheres had been disconnected by surgery. For these patients, the bridge of fibers that normally keeps both halves in harmony, that glowing highway of signals we spoke of before, had been severed. The result wasn't chaos as one might expect, it was cooperation, but in an unexpected way. When researchers gave a split-brain patient two pencils and asked them to draw two different shapes at once, something extraordinary happened. Their hands moved gracefully, each completing its own task with perfect precision. One drew the circle, the other the square, as if they had rehearsed it for years. It was coordination without communication, a duet without dialogue. The scientists called this strange phenomenon cross-cueing. What it meant in simpler terms was that each side of the brain found ways to communicate indirectly through the body. The left hemisphere, which could speak, and the right hemisphere, which could only act, developed a kind of silent code. If the right hand did something, the left eye might notice it, and the speaking half would infer what its quieter twin had seen. The hands became messengers, the gestures themselves a language. It's astonishing when you think about it. Even when the bridge between them was gone, the two minds still reached out to each other through movement, through rhythm, through shared space. The self, it seems, will always find a way to stay whole. In a way, we all practice our own form of cross-cueing every day. You may not have a severed corpus callosum, but you know what it feels like when parts of you disagree. One part wants to rest, another insists on working. One side of your mind whispers caution, the other hums with curiosity. Yet somehow, the conflict doesn't tear you apart. You navigate the world as one person, even though the conversation inside never really stops. Sometimes, the bridge between your thoughts is your body. You might pace when anxious, letting your muscles do the talking until your mind calms. You might hum absent-mindedly when you're trying to think. You might reach out to someone without knowing what words to say. These are all forms of cooperation on paper. Your body translating emotion into motion, thought into gesture, so that all the pieces of you stay connected. Even between people, we see echoes of this. Two friends who finish each other's sentences, a couple who can share a glance and know what the other means, a musician following another's rhythm without speaking. Our brains are wired for collaboration, within and beyond ourselves. When we lose connection, we create new paths. When words fail, we invent new languages, touch, tone, timing, expression. For the split-brain patients, these new languages were literal. One side of their body could reveal what the other side knew. A patient might laugh at a joke he couldn't explain because the humour registered only in the half of the brain that couldn't speak. He might select an object with his left hand, a snow shovel, when shown a picture of winter, even though his right hand, guided by the speaking hemisphere, picked something else. When asked why he'd chosen the shovel, the left hemisphere calmly answered, "To clean out the chicken coop." A perfectly reasonable story, except there was no chicken coop. The right hemisphere had seen snow. The left, cut off from that vision, invented an explanation. Together they made a new truth, half literal, half creative. There's something deeply human about that, our instinct to cooperate, even in confusion. The two halves of the brain, even when divided, still sought harmony through compromise and imagination. Perhaps that's what consciousness itself is, an endless negotiation between parts, each doing its best to be understood. If we look closely, the same principle holds for our relationships, our societies, even our emotions. We may think of ourselves as divided, logic versus feeling, mind versus body, yet the truth is gentler. These sides aren't enemies. They're partners learning to dance without stepping on each other's feet. When one hand trembles, the other steadies it. When one side falters, the other compensates. Even when the bridge of understanding seems gone, something inside still reaches across the gap. A smile, a breath, a rhythm of shared intention. Cooperation, it seems, doesn't always require perfect connection. Sometimes it only needs trust. If the split brain experiments teach us anything, it's that unity is not the absence of division. It's the art of conversation between differences. The brain, with all its complexity, is proof of that. A living partnership of contradictions. One half creates order, the other colour. One half speaks, the other feels. And between them runs a current of compromise, quiet and continuous. So the next time you find yourself torn, wanting two things at once, thinking two thoughts that don't seem to fit, remember the brain's quiet example. The hands that found a way to draw two shapes at once. The hemispheres that kept inventing new languages just to stay in touch. There's a kind of grace in that imperfection. It's what makes us resilient, adaptable, endlessly curious. And if we follow that quiet rhythm of compromise a little further, it leads us to an even deeper reflection. That maybe control was never about one side winning or leading the other. Maybe it's an agreement, a harmony struck between all the little voices within us, a collective decision to move as one, even when we disagree. From here, our exploration opens into that idea, the possibility that the self is not a command but a consensus, a treaty signed again and again by the many minds that live within one skull. If you could listen closely to your own mind, you might hear more than one voice speaking at once. Some are confident and loud, others whisper from the edges. One side plans, another dreams. One calculates, the other feels. They overlap and interrupt each other, yet somehow arrive at a single decision, a single you. For all the science and philosophy we have built, the truth may be surprisingly simple. The self is not a command, but an agreement. Inside the skull, billions of tiny cells are constantly negotiating, sending messages, voting quietly on what happens next. One region of the brain might favour action, another urges caution. Somewhere else, memory reminds you of what worked before, while emotion offers its own strong opinion. The resulting decision isn't the voice of one ruler, but the harmony of a committee. And remarkably, the committee works. We like to think of ourselves as individuals, each thought streaming neatly from a single source, but the mind is more like a town square at dusk, alive with chatter, debate, laughter and argument. Every voice believes it is the one in charge, yet through some quiet miracle they find consensus. You turn left, you say yes, you smile, you choose. It feels simple, it isn't. Scientists once thought consciousness might live in a single location, a seat of the soul hidden in some deep fold of tissue. But what experiments like the split brain studies revealed is that awareness doesn't sit anywhere in particular. It floats among connections. It's the pattern that emerges when all these voices speak to each other in rhythm. Imagine again that inner orchestra we met earlier. Each musician has their own sheet of music, their own timing and tempo. The melody of the self comes not from any single instrument, but from the moment they play together, the instant the sound becomes more than the sum of its notes. If one section drifts too far, the music feels off. But as long as each listens to the others, harmony returns. The mind works in much the same way. Some scientists describe perception as a kind of controlled hallucination, the brain's best guess at reality, continually updated by what the world whispers back. It's a poetic way of saying that everything you see, feel, and think is a collaboration between the signals coming in and the stories already playing inside your head. You don't perceive the world directly, you negotiate it. You predict, the world responds, and together you settle on something that feels real enough to live in. You might notice this negotiation in everyday moments. When you glance quickly at something unfamiliar, a shadow, a distant figure, a strange noise, your brain rushes to interpret it, filling in the blanks before the details arrive. Sometimes it gets it right, sometimes it doesn't. You might think you saw someone you know, only to realize it was a stranger. You might hear your name in the murmur of a crowd when no one called you at all. These small mistakes are proof of how eager the brain is to find agreement, to make the world coherent, even if it must bend a little truth to do so. But the mind doesn't just negotiate with the outside world, it negotiates with itself. Consider how you talk yourself through a difficult decision. That quiet back and forth between logic and emotion, reason and instinct. You weigh the pros and cons, recall past experiences, imagine the outcomes. The feeling that one side wins is really just the moment the internal debate ends in temporary harmony. Tomorrow, the balance might shift again. This understanding that consciousness is a consensus changes how we see control. You're not a driver gripping the wheel, but the vehicle itself. Engine, frame, movement and direction all at once. Each system plays its role, and when they align, you move smoothly through the world. When they argue, you stall or swerve. Control, then, isn't a throne to be occupied. It's a rhythm to be maintained. There's comfort in that idea. It means that even when you feel uncertain or divided, you're still whole. The disagreement inside you isn't a flaw. It's a sign that your mind is listening to itself. The many voices within are simply tuning the strings, searching for balance. Sometimes harmony takes time. Even the moments that feel most unified, when you say, I decided, I believed, I loved, are, in truth, the result of that hidden conversation. Somewhere inside, countless tiny votes have already been cast. Memory whispered one thing, emotion another, logic added its data, and body language cast its final say. Consciousness merely announces the results. The eye that speaks is the press release of a much larger system at work. It's humbling to realize how cooperative we really are, even within ourselves. Every action, every feeling, every thought is an alliance. When you reach for a glass of water, perception, coordination, desire, and motion all agree for a brief moment on a common goal. When you comfort a friend, empathy, memory, and social intuition come together in quiet solidarity. The world moves forward on these tiny treaties. Maybe that's why humans have always been drawn to music and conversation, because deep down, we're built to resonate with others the way our brain's regions resonate with each other. The same patterns that hold your consciousness together repeat themselves in society, in art, in love. We're all, in a sense, extensions of the same principle: cooperation. You could say the brain is the smallest democracy in the universe, voting on every heartbeat, every smile, every sigh. And like all democracies, it isn't perfect. Some voices dominate, some get drowned out. But as long as the conversation continues, the system survives. Awareness persists. So when you find yourself wondering who you really are, remember that there's no single answer waiting somewhere inside your head. You are the sum of many agreements, a chorus, a collection, a meeting always in progress. And far from being confusing, that's what makes you remarkable. If we follow that understanding a little further, we begin to see what guides those inner negotiations, the subtle forces that set the rhythm of our decisions, emotions, memories, and the warmth of human connection. They are the tuning keys of the orchestra, the gentle hand that keeps the tempo of cooperation. And that is where our quiet journey now turns, toward the invisible hand of feeling and how it steers both our choices and our sense of self. Trust is a quiet thing. You don't often notice it while it's there, only when it falters, when a voice sounds different, when a pause lingers too long. It's not built in the mind's logic, but in something much deeper, something that flickers between warmth and chill. Inside you, long before words form, your body measures this temperature, deciding in an instant whether to lean forward or pull away. Imagine two people sitting across a table. Between them lies a small pile of coins. The first person slides a few across, inviting the other to invest them. The rules are simple. What you share can multiply, but only if the other person chooses to return part of it. It's a small, harmless game, a laboratory version of a handshake. But beneath that simple exchange, the brain's ancient emotional machinery hums to life. In those moments of uncertainty, a small region deep in the brain awakens. You might think of it as a tiny thermometer that gauges the emotional climate of every interaction. It listens to the body's signals, a quickened heartbeat, the faint warmth in your chest, the tightening or softening of breath, and translates them into a feeling. Is this moment safe? Is this person kind? Does something feel off? The reading isn't in degrees or numbers, it's in comfort, tension, and intuition. Close by, another part of the brain takes on the role of a thermostat. It doesn't just measure, it adjusts. It weighs long-term goals, remembers past experiences, and decides how much warmth to keep or release. When trust begins to feel fragile, this inner regulator lowers emotional heat to keep you from burning. When trust deepens, it turns up the warmth, encouraging closeness and cooperation. The two work together beautifully, though not always smoothly. One senses the warmth of guilt, the other decides whether to cool it down. One catches the sting of betrayal, the other chooses whether to forgive. They form a feedback loop between heart and reason, a quiet negotiation that keeps our relationships intact. In everyday life, you feel this dance constantly. When you lend a friend your car, share a secret, or believe a promise, you're not doing math. You're taking a reading of warmth. Your emotions, those often messy, unpredictable sensations, are not intruders in the house of reason. They are the house itself, the architecture that allows reason to stand. Some scientists once viewed emotion as noise, background static that had to be filtered out for logic to work. But experiments like this small trust game reveal the opposite. When people make decisions purely by calculation, they lose the subtle, human ability to cooperate. The equations may be perfect, but the world becomes cold. It turns out that the heart's quiet hum, that tiny signal of warmth and unease, is what keeps societies alive. Consider guilt. It's not pleasant. It makes your chest feel heavy, your throat tight. Yet guilt is a form of emotional engineering, a way for your body to maintain connection. It reminds you that your actions ripple outward, that the comfort of others is tied to your own. Without guilt, there's no repair. Without repair, no trust or empathy. The quick, wordless resonance that lets you feel another's mood. You see someone trip, and your body jolts as if you fell too. You notice a friend's small sadness and instinctively soften your tone. These responses rise before thought, like a tide that doesn't ask permission. The warmth of empathy spreads through the room like sunlight through water, invisible yet unmistakable. Somewhere inside, the brain's hidden thermometer measures that shared glow, signalling to the thermostat above, "It's safe here. You can open the windows, let the warmth in." In a way, emotions are like weather patterns inside the mind, currents that guide our choices. Reason may pilot the ship, but emotion is the wind. Without it, we would drift endlessly, calculating routes no one cares to follow. The brain doesn't just think, it feels its way forward. Every decision you make is steeped in emotional temperature, in the quiet sense of whether the world feels warm enough to approach or cold enough to avoid. If you've ever trusted someone and been hurt, you know how quickly the thermostat changes. The warmth drops, the inner air chills. It may take months, even years, to bring the temperature back up, but the very fact that it can rise again, that we can trust after loss, reveals how adaptive emotion truly is. It learns, adjusts, and heals. Even in simple gestures, a nod, a shared meal, a small favour returned, you are recalibrating your emotional climate. Each act of kindness raises the temperature slightly, reinforcing the network of trust that makes communities possible. We often imagine civilization as built from laws and agreements, but beneath every contract lies something older and softer. A shared feeling that this person will treat me fairly, that warmth will be returned with warmth. That's what the brain's thermostat protects. It doesn't guard against chaos. It maintains equilibrium. It keeps your emotional world within the range where life and cooperation can thrive. Too much heat and we burn in anger. Too little and we freeze in apathy. But between those extremes lies the gentle warmth of understanding, the balance point where connection survives. So emotions aren't the enemy of reason. They are the scaffolding that allows reason to build anything meaningful. Without them, you might still choose, but you wouldn't care. You might still act, but you wouldn't belong. Perhaps tonight, as you think of the people you trust, the ones whose presence warms the air around you, you can feel that quiet inner balance at work. The same small circuitry that once helped early humans huddle together against the cold still hums in your chest, guiding you toward kindness. Trust, in the end, isn't a leap of logic. It's a temperature, a feeling that tells your body when to open its arms and when to retreat. And most of the time, when that warmth rises and holds steady, it means your internal weather is clear, your mind and heart are in tune. As we drift further into this gentle understanding, our story now turns to a man who lost that balance entirely, not in metaphor but in flesh. A man whose accidents silenced the brain's inner filter, leaving emotion and impulse untethered. His story begins with a spark, a flash of iron, and the sudden shattering realization that even the mind's most delicate machinery can change who we are. There's a story that sounds almost like a myth, a tale whispered among doctors and philosophers alike. It begins on a bright September afternoon in 1848, with a railway foreman named Phineas Gage. He was young, strong, and proud of his precision. He supervised a team blasting rock to clear the way for new tracks in Vermont. His friends called him dependable, a man whose word and temper were steady as steel. That afternoon, Gage was tamping gunpowder into a hole with an iron rod, a polished bar about as long as a man's arm and sharp at one end. He was distracted for a moment, maybe by a voice, maybe by habit. Then, a spark, a flash, a sound like thunder confined to a single breath. The explosion drove the iron rod upward through his left cheek, behind his eye, and out the top of his head. The bar landed several meters away, slick with blood but still warm from the blast. For a moment, everything stopped. The men around him froze, expecting him to fall, but Gage didn't. He staggered, spoke, even walked. Witnesses said he could still tell time. He was taken to a wagon, holding the back of his head, half laughing at his own survival. It sounds impossible, and in a way it was. Doctors soon realized the miracle came at a cost. The rod hadn't killed him, but it had changed him. In the months that followed, the dependable, gentle Gage became someone unrecognisable. He swore loudly, insulted friends, made reckless decisions and abandoned plans without thought. The man who once commanded others with quiet authority now seemed to be commanded by impulse itself. What the rod had damaged was the delicate system that connects emotion with control. The inner voice that whispers, maybe don't. In Gage, that whisper had fallen silent. The result was not the loss of intelligence, but the loss of balance. His mind could still reason, but his feelings no longer obeyed reason's rhythm. He became a storm without a compass. At the time, no one knew how to explain it. The word personality barely existed in medicine. But over the next century, scientists began to understand that the front part of the brain, the region just behind the forehead, serves as a kind of filter. It doesn't create emotion, it moderates it. It takes the rush of anger and turns it into a measured response, translates sorrow into empathy, and shapes instinct into choice. Without that filter, emotion flows raw and unedited, flooding every decision. You can imagine this system as a partnership between two neighbours. One is the emotional engine, fast, fiery, full of feeling. The other is the planner, careful, patient, the one who checks the locks at night. In a healthy mind, they converse constantly. But when that bridge is broken, emotion begins to shout without anyone left to interpret. That was Gage's world. His emotions were still alive, but they had lost their anchor. Anger came like lightning, joy like fire, grief like a wave. He was at once vividly human and tragically adrift. Those who knew him said he was no longer Gage. The man survived, but the balance, the quiet negotiation between heart and reason, had vanished. It's easy to view this story as tragedy, but it also revealed something extraordinary. Before Gage, many believed reason and emotion were separate. The mind versus the heart, intellect versus instinct. But his life proved the opposite. Without emotion, reason collapses into aimless calculation. Without reason, emotion becomes chaos. We need both to be whole. You can feel this same partnership at work every day. When you resist saying something cruel in anger, that's your inner filter adjusting the flame. When you listen to a sad song and cry just enough to feel relief but not despair, it's there again. The heart and the filter dancing in perfect time. Even small decisions, what to say, when to wait, when to forgive, depend on that subtle balance. If that balance wavers, the world itself begins to shift. Imagine feeling insulted but never stopping to ask if it was intentional, or wanting something and taking it without thinking of consequence. These aren't failures of morality, but of communication between emotional impulse and thoughtful reflection. It's the conversation that keeps our humanity aligned, and when it breaks, the world becomes strangely immediate, all impulse and reaction. In a way, we all have moments of Gage within us, flashes of unfiltered emotion when the inner voice steps aside. You might feel it in sudden anger, when words leave your mouth before they pass through thought, or in laughter that bursts out too loud, surprising even you. In those moments, you glimpse the power of that filter, not as a cage, but as the gentle hand that steadies the current. The story of Phineas Gage is often told as a lesson in neuroscience, but it's also a mirror held up to every human life. It shows how much of who we are depends on the harmony between passion and restraint, emotion and judgment. Gage lost that harmony not through choice, but through chance. A reminder that personality is not a fixed soul, but a living balance, a fragile duet between circuits and experience. Later in life, Gage regained some of what he had lost. He worked as a coach driver in Chile, managing horses and passengers across long, dangerous routes. To do that, he had to relearn patience, foresight, and responsibility. Slowly, the rhythm returned. Perhaps his brain, ever adaptable, rebuilt new paths where old ones had been burned away. His story ends not in tragedy, but in quiet resilience, the mind finding its way back toward equilibrium. What we call conscience may be nothing more and nothing less than this balance. It isn't a glowing halo of virtue, it's the result of many small systems working together. Emotion, memory, foresight, empathy, each adjusting the flame of the other. Morality, then, is not abstract, it's practical. It's the art of staying in tune with ourselves and others. So, when you feel that small pause before you speak, that half second where you decide whether to act or hold back, that's your living filter, quietly protecting the shape of your life. It may not always get it right, but without it, we would all be sparks in the wind. And as we follow that spark a little further, our quiet journey turns towards something larger. Not just the mind balancing itself, but minds balancing each other. The way emotions ripple through crowds, through laughter and tears, connecting us in invisible synchrony. The next chapter belongs not to the solitary mind, but to the society of minds that breathe and feel together. Step into a quiet cafe on a rainy afternoon. The air smells faintly of coffee and damp wool. Someone at the far corner laughs, not loudly, but enough for the sound to ripple through the room. Another person smiles without knowing why. A few seconds later, a low wave of warmth spreads, and for just a moment, strangers share the same emotional temperature. It happens every day, everywhere, without our noticing. Feelings are contagious, and the brain, it seems, was built to catch them. Inside each of us is a network of tiny echo chambers. When you see someone smile, small clusters of cells deep in your brain light up, as if you were smiling too. When you see someone wince in pain, your body flinches, your breath tightens, even though no harm has touched you. These invisible echoes are what scientists once called mirror systems, but they're less like mirrors and more like tuning forks. They resonate to the vibration of another's experience, translating sight into shared feeling. You can feel this resonance in simple gestures. Think of a yawn, how one can set off a chain reaction through a room, or laughter, which spreads through a crowd like wind through grass. No one commands it, it just happens. Even silence can be shared, a hush that falls before a concert when hundreds of people collectively hold their breath. In those moments, we are not separate minds. We are a temporary symphony of attention, emotion, and rhythm. For much of history, we imagined the mind as a fortress, sealed off, guarded, private. But neuroscience paints a softer picture. Your mind is not a closed space. It's a house with open windows. Every smile, sigh, or frown that drifts through those windows subtly rearranges the furniture inside. This exchange doesn't just shape mood, it shapes identity. Who you are is partly sculpted by the company you keep, the emotions you absorb, the stories you mirror. It begins early. A baby, only days old, sticks out its tongue after seeing an adult do the same. It doesn't understand imitation, but it feels the rhythm of connection. The foundation of empathy is laid long before words arrive. Later, we learn to navigate entire emotional landscapes this way, reading faces, tones, and gestures like constellations. Our social intuition becomes the compass that steers us through friendship, family, and community. When you walk into a room full of tension, your chest tightens. When someone nearby is anxious, you might feel restless too. That's not imagination, it's resonance. Your inner tuning forks are vibrating in sympathy with another person's mood. This sensitivity is both gift and challenge. It allows us to comfort and cooperate, but it also means we can absorb stress and sorrow that aren't our own. The brain keeps this sensitivity in check through an elegant balance. The emotional circuits, the ones that feel another's pain, are intertwined with those that regulate distance. You can feel with someone, but not drown in their experience. It's like standing beside a fire, close enough to feel warmth, far enough not to burn. When this balance slips, empathy becomes exhaustion. When it holds, empathy becomes wisdom. Everyday life is full of these silent exchanges. You smile at a stranger, and their expression softens. They pass the warmth to someone else. In traffic, one person's impatience spreads like static until someone breaks it with a small act of courtesy, a wave, a pause, a space given. Even through screens and pixels, this resonance flows. Words typed in kindness can steady a stranger's heart half a world away. The network is vast, but the current is human, and this emotional exchange isn't limited to individuals. Entire groups move in rhythm, their moods rising and falling together. Think of a stadium cheering in unison, a protest swelling with shared purpose, or a choir breathing as one. For those moments, boundaries dissolve. Each person feels their heartbeat synced to a larger pulse. It's exhilarating and humbling. The sense of I expands into we. You might wonder how this shared rhythm serves us. It's more than sentiment, it's survival. Early humans depended on group cohesion as much as food or shelter. Reading another's intent quickly, a raised brow, a tremor in the voice, could mean the difference between trust and betrayal. The same networks that once kept small tribes safe now help us navigate cities, friendships, and families. Our social brain is ancient, yet ever active. Sometimes disconnectedness surprises us. You recall a friend you haven't spoken to in years, and moments later, they call. You sense when someone you love is upset before they say a word. It feels mystical, but it's simply the result of attunement, years of small signals learned and remembered. Each relationship creates its own frequency, and your brain, like an old radio, still remembers the wavelength. Of course, this openness has a shadow. If joy spreads, so can anger. A single negative comment can ripple through an entire group. Online, where tone and presence are stripped away, emotional contagion travels even faster. The same neural circuits that help us empathize can amplify division. Yet even that fragility holds meaning. It reminds us how deeply our minds depend on one another. When you step back and see this from a wider lens, it's astonishing. Billions of individual brains, each one wired for solitude and connection at once, forming a planetary network of shared emotion. Every glance, every gesture, every word is a thread in the web of collective feeling. We are not separate islands of consciousness. We are tides in the same sea, and still, there are currents deeper than the social. Some feelings don't come from those around us. They drift upward from older waters, memories we never lived, fears we never learned. They move through families, generations, even cultures, carried not just by stories but by biology itself. Some drafts that pass through those open windows of the mind come not from outside but from long ago. The body remembers more than the mind knows, and if we listen closely we can hear those ancient winds whispering through our cells, hints of the lives and lessons that came before us. From here our journey drifts toward those quiet inheritances, the way experience leaves fingerprints on the code of the life, and how even what we never lived can shape who we become. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a quiet winter morning in the Netherlands nearly 80 years ago. Snow lies thin across the ground. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and cold metal. A mother stands in line for bread that will never come. Her child kicks softly in her belly, unaware of the silence that has settled over the city. It's the winter of 1944, a season historians later called the Hunger Winter. Food had vanished, trains had stopped, and entire families survived on little more than tulip bulbs and melted snow. Mothers starved so their children might live, and yet, decades later, something remarkable was found in those children, and even in their children's children. They carried the imprint of that winter within them. Doctors noticed it first. Many of the babies born after the famine grew up smaller, more prone to heart disease and diabetes. Some were anxious, some cautious, some inexplicably alert to scarcity. These weren't just habits of personality, they were biological echoes. The famine had written itself into the body's instruction book, changing not the words themselves, but how they were read. You can think of your genes as a vast library, shelves upon shelves of old silent volumes. They hold the recipes for everything your body might become, but those books are not all open at once. Life decides which ones to read and sometimes which ones to close. The stress, hunger and fear of that winter were bookmarks placed in those volumes, reminders left for future generations. The children born afterward inherited those bookmarks. Their bodies remembered scarcity even when the cupboards were full. This process is what scientists later called epigenetic inheritance. Though the phrase feels too mechanical for something so human, it's not about the cold machinery of molecules, it's about memory, a memory folded into cells, sleeping quietly in the code. Something similar happens in the small, soft world of laboratory mice. In one experiment, researchers exposed mice to the scent of almonds followed by a tiny harmless shock, enough to startle but not to injure. Within a few days, the mice had learned to associate that smell with danger. Their hearts raced whenever they smelled it again. The real surprise came later. The offspring of those mice, who had never been shocked, who had never even smelled almonds before, also showed fear at the same scent. Their tiny hearts raced too. Somehow, the memory of danger had leapt across generations, carried not by story or example, but by chemistry. You might imagine this inheritance like a faint watercolour stain spreading through time, lighter with each generation, yet still visible. Life remembers, and the memories it keeps are not always the gentle ones. This isn't destiny. These cellular bookmarks don't trap us, they prepare us. A body shaped by famine becomes efficient at storing food. A body shaped by fear becomes quick to notice threat. In a world that changes slowly, this helps. But in a modern world, where hunger and safety shift within a single lifetime, those old instincts can become burdens. Ghosts that once protected us now haunting our health, our mood, our ways of trust. You might see it in families who have lived through war, migration or hardship. Grandparents who wake at the faintest sound. Parents who count every grain of rice. Children who feel an unease they can't quite name. These aren't superstitions, they're echoes. The body keeps a quiet record, sometimes in muscle, sometimes in chemistry, sometimes in habit. Perhaps this explains why certain fears feel older than we are. The sudden chill at the sound of breaking glass, the comfort of hoarding small things, the deep relief of someone saying, "There's enough for everyone." Some part of us, ancient and wordless, listens for signals of survival, even when reason says we are safe. The brain itself responds to these inherited messages. It learns patterns from the body signals, adjusting its own rhythm of alertness and calm. A person whose ancestors faced danger may live with a thermostat set slightly higher, ready to react, quick to act. Another, whose ancestors lived in abundance, might move through life at a slower, easier tempo. Neither is right or wrong, both are adaptations. When we understand this, compassion deepens. We see that not all reactions are chosen. Some are inherited rehearsals. The person who startles easily, the one who worries too much, the one who saves everything just in case. They may be carrying the weight of someone else's winter. Even joy can be inherited. Studies hint that kindness too leaves traces, that nurture and calm can mark the body just as fear does. Safety teaches cells to rest, to heal, to trust. Perhaps that's why love feels so ancient when we give or receive it. It's not just emotion, it's legacy. The chemistry of care passed from parent to child, generation to generation. So we don't only inherit eye colour or height, we inherit the rhythm of our ancestors' breathing, the pace of their heartbeat, the echoes of their choices. We inherit the memory of hunger and the memory of generosity, the balance of both shaping who we become. Think again of that mother standing in the snow of 1944. She could not have known that her courage, her refusal to give up, would ripple forward through time, shaping lives she would never see. Her body's memory became part of a larger human story, one of endurance, resilience, and the deep intelligence of life itself. Sometimes the ghosts that guide us are biological, not metaphorical, but perhaps that makes them no less sacred. They remind us that the self is not a single lifetime's invention, but a continuation of many, a bridge of memory built from blood, care, and persistence. And as we carry those invisible inheritances, we face a question as old as awareness itself. How much of our will is truly ours, and how much is the echo of those who came before? How do we distinguish between what we decide and what we were quietly prepared to feel? If we follow that question into the stillness, it leads us to a more delicate mystery, the one we'll explore next, the strange, shifting line between action and intention, between I did this and something in me did. A threshold where agency begins to shimmer, fragile, fallible, and profoundly human. Imagine sitting in a small, quiet lab. The air hums faintly with the sound of computers and the steady rhythm of your own heartbeat. Across from you, a researcher smiles and slides a button panel toward your hand. Just press whichever one you feel like, she says softly. Whenever you decide, that's fine. You nod, rest your fingers on the buttons and wait. On a screen, a simple pattern of lights flickers. Left, right, left, right. You press one, perhaps the left. You feel the small click beneath your fingertip and think, I chose that. But a moment later, the researcher turns the monitor toward you, showing a line that pulsed before you moved. That, she says, was the moment your brain started to decide. It happened half a second before you thought you'd made the choice. Half a second, barely the blink of an eye, and yet long enough to raise one of the oldest questions in existence. Who's really in control? For decades, scientists have repeated experiments like this, gently tracing the difference between intention and action. Time and again, they find the same pattern. Long before you consciously decide to move, a faint wave begins in your brain's motor circuits, a whisper of preparation. The orchestra is already tuning up before the conductor raises the baton. It's tempting to imagine this as evidence that free will is an illusion, that our choices are nothing more than afterthoughts. But that's not quite what it means. The truth is subtler and stranger. Consciousness, it turns out, may not be the origin of our decisions but their narrator, the storyteller who arrives just as the act begins, ready to explain it as mine. It's not deception, it's timing. The system is so well rehearsed that awareness blends seamlessly into motion, giving the illusion that it led the way. To explore this more playfully, scientists once invited participants into a room that looked more like a magician's stage than a lab. On one side of the table sat the neuroscientist Yuri Maoz, a quiet smile on his face. On the other, the cognitive researcher Heather Berlin, willing to become the subject of her own curiosity. The task was simple: make a spontaneous decision, but in truth, the experiment had a twist. Hidden in the setup was a device that could read the brain's flickers of preparation, those invisible moments when the neurons begin to hum with intent. Before Berlin even pressed a button, the computer sometimes predicted which one she would choose. The effect was unnerving, like seeing a card trick where your choice was guessed before you made it. But the real wonder came when the prediction occasionally went wrong, when the machine guessed left, and she still chose right. The illusion shattered. In that instant, the delicate dance between unconscious preparation and conscious veto revealed itself. Yes, the brain begins to move before awareness, but awareness still has the power to intervene. The orchestra may start playing on its own, but the conductor can still change the song. This balance between automation and oversight lies at the heart of our sense of agency. Every moment of your life, from tying your shoes to falling in love, involves this quiet partnership. Your brain prepares actions without waiting for permission, and your awareness steps in to confirm, redirect, or cancel. Together, they create the seamless experience we call choice. To describe this with symbols or measurements would miss its wonder. It's more like watching waves approach the shore. The deep ocean, your unconscious, begins the motion. Awareness is the foam at the crest, sparkling as it arrives. The beauty of the wave isn't lost in knowing where it began, it's deepened. Consider how this plays out in daily life. When you catch a falling cup before realizing it's slipping, that's your body moving faster than thought. When you pause before saying something unkind, that's awareness stepping in, pulling gently on the reins. Neither part alone defines you. The self is the conversation between impulse and reflection, motion and meaning. In the lab, when people experience their actions being subtly predicted or nudged, they often laugh in disbelief. "I thought I'd decided," they say, as if someone had performed a magic trick inside their skull. And in a way, that's exactly what's happening. The mind is both magician and audience, deceiver and believer. It hides its own sleight of hand, so the story of "I chose" feels whole. Perhaps this is what allows life to feel fluid. If you had to be aware of every micro decision, every muscle twitch, every blink, every calculation, the world would slow to a crawl, you'd drown in detail. The illusion of seamless control is not a flaw, but a mercy. It keeps your experience simple enough to live. And maybe that's what freedom really is. Not absolute command, but harmony. A dance between systems so synchronized that you can't tell who leads. You feel in charge because the timing feels perfect. Like a duet between jazz musicians, the rhythm breathes between partners, not above them. Think of all the times you've said, "I just felt like doing it." A sudden phone call to a friend, an impulse to step outside and look at the sky. Those are moments when the orchestra plays without a score and consciousness joins in mid-song. The result is improvisation, not predetermined, not random, but alive. So when experiments show that the brain begins to act before we're aware, don't hear that as proof of powerlessness. Hear it as proof of partnership. The unconscious is not an enemy. It's the stage crew keeping the play running smoothly. Consciousness is the actor who steps into the light, bringing meaning to motion. Without the crew, the stage would stay dark. Without the actor, there would be no story. Perhaps the magician in your mind doesn't steal control at all. Perhaps it protects the mystery, allowing you to live without seeing all the strings. After all, every good illusion depends on timing, on the perfect overlap of unseen cause and visible effect. And if we follow that shimmering thread of timing a little further, it leads us toward an even stranger trick. Moments when the illusion of control begins to falter, when the movement happens first and the feeling of "I did that" arrives too late. The finger that twitches before you decide, the rhythm that stumbles, and the fragile beat of agency revealed in silence. There is a curious feeling that comes when your body moves on its own. Maybe you've brushed away a bee before realizing it was there, or caught something you dropped without knowing how. For a moment, thought lags behind action. You look at your own hand and think, "Did I do that?" In a quiet laboratory, scientists once tried to recreate that sensation, to understand what happens when movement outruns awareness. The room was simple: a chair, a small device that made a soft clicking sound, and a coil that looked like a silver bracelet hovering just above the head. It wasn't magic, but it might have felt like it. The device could send a faint pulse of energy, so small it couldn't be felt, yet strong enough to nudge the brain's motor circuits. When the pulse arrived, a finger twitched, just slightly. A single involuntary tap on the table. Participants laughed at first, assuming they had moved on purpose. But when the pulse repeated at unpredictable intervals, something strange happened. They began to feel uncertain. Sometimes they claimed they had chosen to move, even when the impulse came entirely from the invisible tap of energy. Other times they said they hadn't moved at all, even when their finger clearly had. It was as if the sense of "I did that," the inner signature of control, flickered on and off, like a candle in the wind. From an outsider's view, nothing seemed mysterious. A signal had entered the brain, muscles had obeyed, and a finger had moved. But inside the participant's experience, something far more delicate was unravelling. The rhythm between intention, action, and feedback had slipped by a fraction of a heartbeat, and with it, the certainty of authorship. Normally the brain keeps these elements perfectly in sync. A thought forms, a whisper of intent, followed almost instantly by the body's motion. The senses then confirm, yes, that was me. It's a rhythm so fast, so precise, that you never feel the separate steps. It's like hearing a symphony where every note arrives exactly when it should. But in that lab, the experimenters had quietly disturbed the timing. The invisible pulse reached the brain a few milliseconds early, before the conscious decision could surface. The music still played, but just slightly out of tune. The participants felt it, not as sound, but as disorientation. The melody of agency had faltered. Of course, there were no symbols or equations floating above their heads, only a sense of confusion, the feeling of being both actor and observer. When the timing was restored, so was confidence. That was me, they said again, smiling in relief, unaware of how close their certainty had come to dissolving. This gentle experiment reveals something profound. Control is not a single command, but a choreography, a conversation between brain and body, cause and confirmation, desire and result. When the timing aligns, you feel unity. When it slips, you feel estranged from your own movements. You've probably experienced this without any machines involved. Maybe while speaking, you've heard your voice echo back on a phone call a fraction too late, and for a split second, it didn't feel like your own. Or when typing quickly, your fingers move faster than your thoughts, and a sentence appears you don't quite remember writing. Those are tiny glimpses of the same principle, the fragile synchronization that keeps your sense of I intact. The feeling of agency is less about control itself and more about timing, the rhythm of signals arriving when expected. When you flip a light switch and the bulb responds instantly, you feel powerful. If there's a delay, you tap the switch again, uncertain if it's working. The same applies inside your mind. When intention and effect drift apart, doubt appears. The beauty of this system lies in its imperfection. The brain constantly predicts the world, including your own actions, and compares those predictions to what actually happens. Every blink, every breath, every movement is an act of expectation fulfilled. When reality matches the prediction, you feel in control. When it doesn't, you feel surprise or unease. The world for a heartbeat stops feeling like yours. Yet this isn't failure, it's how you learn. That tiny flicker of mismatch, that wait, what moment, is how the mind corrects itself. Agency, it turns out, isn't a fixed property but a living negotiation, renewed with every gesture and thought. In a sense, you could say your brain is always a few moments ahead, laying out a red carpet for each action you'll soon take. Your conscious awareness follows just behind, stepping onto it with grace, unaware it was rolled out in advance. It's the perfect illusion, and a necessary one. Without it, life would feel fragmented, full of disjointed events that never quite belong to you. There's comfort in the illusion, but also humility. If control depends on timing so delicate that a single invisible pulse can unsettle it, then the feeling of free will is less a throne and more a dance floor. You're not ruling your movements from above. You're dancing with them, step by step, guided by rhythm and feedback. This perspective doesn't make life mechanical. It makes it miraculous. The fact that awareness and action align as often as they do is astonishing. Billions of cells must coordinate across the body's vast network every second, balancing signals as faint as whispers. And somehow, out of that symphony of precision and delay, emerges the experience of selfhood, the feeling that you are both the music and the musician. Perhaps that's why we find rhythm so comforting. In drumming, in walking, in the cadence of speech, it mirrors the internal beat of control, the heartbeat of agency. When that rhythm falters, we feel lost. When it returns, we feel whole. So when your body moves before thought, don't see it as proof of powerlessness. See it as a reminder that the mind and body are partners in a dance older than reason. One leads, the other follows, and then they trade places. What matters is not who leads, but that they move together. And if we trace that dance forward, it brings us to a wider understanding that perhaps agency itself is not a fact but a feeling, a sense as fluid as sight or sound, a perception that can sharpen, fade, or even deceive, yet still shapes the story of who we believe ourselves to be. That is where our next step will take us, into the soft illusion of choice and the strange comfort of believing in our own control. Think for a moment about your senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. You rely on them without question, yet each can be tricked. A shadow that looks like a hole but isn't. A sound you think comes from behind you but echoes from the front. Even the air can bend light so that a straight stick in water seems broken. And still, you trust your senses enough to move through the world. Now, imagine that there's another sense, quieter than all the rest, one you use constantly but rarely notice. It's the sense of agency, the invisible feeling that tells you I am the one doing this. Like vision or balance, it's not a thought, but a perception. It arises automatically as the mind matches intention to outcome, like a musician recognizing the note they just played. When everything runs smoothly, this sense hums beneath awareness, keeping life coherent. You reach for a cup, and the motion feels yours. You speak, and the sound of your voice feels right. But when the rhythm between expectation and result slips, even slightly, that sense of authorship wavers. The world feels a little less yours. In everyday life, this illusion of control is tested all the time. You type a message on your phone, and the device corrects your words before you finish them. It feels like cooperation at first, until it replaces good night with good fight, and suddenly the illusion cracks. The action still came from your fingers, yet somehow it doesn't feel entirely yours. The same happens when a car brakes automatically before you can react, or when a smart device predicts your next move. You acted, but something else acted with you. Agency then behaves like vision, normally smooth and transparent but capable of distortion. The difference is that you can close your eyes, but you can't turn off this inner sense of self in motion. It's the background hum of being alive. Scientists once thought of free will as a single command, a signal sent from the brain's decision center outward. But the truth seems gentler and more complex. The feeling of control emerges from many small comparisons. What did I mean to do? What actually happened? How close were they? If the two align, the brain nods in approval. Yes, that was me. If not, it hesitates. The hesitation is what you feel when something startles you, or when a word slips out that you didn't plan to say. It's not just embarrassment, it's a flicker in the circuitry of authorship. You've likely felt this when learning something new, driving a car, playing an instrument, or speaking a foreign language. At first, every motion feels awkward, half-owned. Your hands or tongue seem to belong to someone else. Then, as the rhythms synchronize, control returns. You stop thinking, and the movement becomes you again. What changed wasn't the mechanics, but the harmony between your prediction and reality, the reweaving of that invisible thread of agency. In this way, free will is less about power and more about coherence. It's the body and brain agreeing on the story of what just happened. Even when the decision begins unconsciously, a heartbeat before awareness, the mind retrofits the feeling of intention, folding it neatly into the timeline. It doesn't matter that the impulse came early. What matters is that the story fits. Agency is the sense of that story fitting snugly around the moment. When it doesn't, the results can feel disorienting. People under certain conditions, fatigue, stress, or influence, sometimes experience actions that feel alien, as if someone else were moving them. In milder moments, you might notice it yourself. A hand reaching for another cookie, a word leaving your mouth before you approve it. You are both the witness and the culprit. These tiny disconnects remind us that the sense of self is more performance than command. But this isn't cause for despair. The illusion of control isn't a flaw, it's a gift. It's the mind's way of making life livable. Imagine if you had to question every movement, every blink, every breath, every step, wondering whether you had truly decided it. You'd never get out of bed. The gentle fiction of agency lets you move through the world with confidence. It's a soft agreement between experience and belief, a handshake between what happens and what feels like yours. There's beauty in this arrangement. Think of how children learn to walk. Each wobbling step is a tiny act of faith in that inner sense. They fall, try again, fall once more, and then one day they walk across the room as if they've always known how. They've tuned the instrument of agency by trial and rhythm. Every adult movement, from dance to handwriting, is that same miracle, repeated endlessly. This inner sense can even stretch beyond the physical. When you read a story and feel drawn into its rhythm, part of you becomes the narrator. When you sing with others, your voice blends until you can't tell which sound is yours. In those moments, agency expands, not lost, but shared. The boundaries of I grow soft, like ink diffusing in water. Of course, there are times when that boundary feels violated, when machines predict our choices, or when algorithms shape what we see and think. The modern world tests our sense of authorship in new ways. Yet the very fact that we can feel the difference, that we know when something is not quite me, proves that the sense of agency still holds power. It may be fragile, but it's also remarkably resilient. Maybe free will was never about absolute control, but about harmony with what moves through us. The poet Rilke once wrote, "The purpose of life is to be defeated by greater and greater things." Perhaps agency works the same way, a delicate balance between surrender and participation. You are not the sole author of your life, but you are the voice that gives it tone. So when you feel the small imperfections, the slip of a word, the automatic gesture, the car that stops before you think to brake, take it not as proof of loss, but of partnership. You are part of a larger intelligence, one that hums quietly beneath thought. The feeling of I did that is the harmony between that deeper rhythm and your awareness of it. And as we drift further into this understanding, our exploration now turns toward the final secret of control, why this illusion, fragile as it is, exists at all, why the mind insists on filling the blanks, inventing coherence, and keeping the story of self unbroken. It's there, in the meaning we make from our own motions, that the puzzle of consciousness begins to glow with quiet light. Picture an old library at night. The lamps are low, their light the colour of honey. Dust drifts lazily through the air. You walk among the shelves, fingertips brushing the spines of ancient books. Some volumes are open, others closed, many half-written. You pause at one and find that several pages are missing. Without thinking, you begin to imagine what might have been there. That quiet act of filling in the blanks is what your brain does every moment you're awake. It is not only a collector of information, but a tireless author of coherence, a meaning maker. When experience leaves gaps, it writes them shut. When memory frays, it stitches the edges. It does this so instinctively that you rarely notice. You simply live inside the finished story. Imagine you're walking home and hear footsteps behind you. You turn, but no one's there. A second later, a leaf skitters across the pavement. Your mind instantly revises the scene. Oh, it was just the wind. In truth, you never saw the leaf move until after your body had already reacted. The explanation arrives later, retrofitted into the narrative. The world feels stable again because your brain refuses to leave any sentence unfinished. Psychologists have seen this creative instinct in countless ways. When people watch brief flashes of random dots and are asked what they saw, the brain connects them into shapes. When a story stops mid-sentence, listeners invent an ending before realizing it. It's not deceit, it's adaptation. We're built to prefer a complete picture, even if we must paint part of it ourselves. Inside the brain, there are no glowing lights labelled meaning or truth. There are only waves of activity passing messages across billions of tiny junctions, each signal looking for a pattern that feels right. When those patterns fit together neatly, when perception, memory and expectation align, the result is understanding, or at least the feeling of it. You could think of this as the mind's candlelight, flickering but steady enough to read by. It doesn't reveal everything, but it keeps the darkness at bay. Without it, we would wake each day in a chaos of unrelated sensations, unsure which memories belong to us. With it, life becomes continuous, as if the universe itself were speaking in paragraphs. The psychologist Mahzarin Banaji once described this instinct simply: the mind must fill the blanks to make sense. It's not optional, it's survival. In an unpredictable world, the brain's first duty is not accuracy but coherence. It weaves feelings, guesses and fragments into a single cloth, because disconnection feels dangerous. A mind that cannot find meaning begins to fray. You can see this in small, gentle ways. When someone you love doesn't text back, your brain drafts explanations. They're busy, they're asleep, they're upset. Each story carries its own emotion. When the reply finally arrives, "Sorry, I was driving," your body exhales as if the world itself had been restored to order. It's not just relief, it's narrative resolution. Even dreams follow this rule. In sleep, random sparks of memory flare, and your mind hurries to arrange them into a story before you wake. A hallway becomes a forest, a voice becomes a song, a fear becomes a chase. You're both dreamer and interpreter, writing the script as it unfolds. The story may vanish by morning, but the impulse behind it never rests. This instinct to explain reaches beyond perception into morality, identity, even love. When you succeed, you tell yourself, "I worked hard." When you fail, "I was unlucky." When someone hurts you, they must have meant it. We arrange these explanations like furniture in the room of the self, comforting, familiar, sometimes misplaced, but always ours. Yet there's beauty in this imperfection. The mind's eagerness to make sense also fuels creativity. The same mechanism that invents causes for random events is what allows poets to see patterns in clouds, musicians to hear rhythm in noise, scientists to find order in data. Meaning-making is both the seed of superstition and the root of discovery. You might think that knowing all this would make life feel hollow, that if the mind is constantly inventing coherence, then perhaps nothing is truly real. But the opposite happens. Realizing that meaning is made, not given, makes it feel more precious. It's like recognizing that a story's power doesn't come from its literal truth, but from the emotions it awakens. And the illusions we create are not lies. They're scaffolding. They give us enough stability to climb toward understanding. The sense of agency you feel, I did this, I decided that, may be an interpretation, but it's an interpretation that allows compassion, accountability, and growth. If you believed every action was just reflex, you'd never bother to become better. The illusion, soft as it is, keeps the flame of purpose alive. Sometimes, though, meaning slips from our grasp. In grief, in shock, in sudden change. The mind reaches for an explanation and finds none. That's when silence can feel unbearable. But even then, the machinery of understanding keeps turning quietly, rearranging memories, searching for patterns, and eventually finding one gentle enough to live with. Healing is just meaning rediscovered. So perhaps the goal is not to eliminate illusions, but to see them clearly, to know that the mind paints its own scenery, and to choose the colours with care. When you notice your thoughts weaving stories around what happens, you might smile and whisper, "Ah, the author is awake again." You can thank it for its service and still keep a little space for wonder. Because sometimes, when the candle of reason flickers low, another kind of meaning emerges, one that doesn't come from analysis but from acceptance. A quiet realization that the world is coherent not because we fully understand it, but because we belong to it. We are threads in its fabric, meaning woven by our very existence. And as we follow that soft understanding further, we find ourselves approaching the edge of reason's reach, the moment where the mind stops explaining and begins to let go. Creativity, flow, surrender, states where the storyteller finally falls silent and the music takes over. That's where our next step will lead, into the art of releasing control and the strange freedom found in simply being. Somewhere in a dim studio, long past midnight, a single light burns above a microphone. A rapper stands before it, eyes closed, a slow rhythm pulsing through his headphones. There's no script, no notebook, just the heartbeat of the beat and a mind about to leap into the unknown. The first word slips out, then another, then a flood. Words collide, rhyme, and twist into meaning. Each second births something new. He's not reading. He's not even thinking, not in the ordinary sense. He's flowing. A scientist named Charles Limb once wondered what happens in the brain when creativity takes over like this, when art emerges faster than analysis can keep up. So he did something few others had attempted. He brought musicians, rappers, and improvisers into a lab and slid them gently into a humming scanner, a kind of listening machine that could trace where blood flowed in the brain as they performed. Inside that quiet tunnel, artists began to rap, eyes closed, lines unplanned. Their voices echoed through headphones as the machine listened. On a nearby screen, colours began to bloom across a map of the brain, showing which regions woke and which dimmed as the music unfolded. What appeared was not chaos, but a kind of rearranged order, a new pattern of control. The parts of the brain that usually monitor mistakes, that weigh and censor, grew still. The regions that shape rhythm, emotion, and language lit up like a sunrise. The watcher inside the mind, the one forever editing, comparing, calculating, stepped aside. In its place, something freer and older took the stage, the system that simply does. It's tempting to imagine that creativity requires wildness, but this study suggested the opposite. The mind doesn't need more control to create. It needs just enough safety to release it. The inner critic, that gentle but persistent supervisor behind your thoughts, quiets down. The well-trained systems below it, honed by years of repetition and play, take the lead. You can feel this difference in your own life. When you rehearse something, you cling to structure, the right word, the right rhythm, the safe path. But when you improvise, humming in the shower, doodling on a napkin, telling a story that keeps surprising even you, the feeling changes. It's as if a door opens and the air becomes lighter. You're no longer directing the current. You are the current. In the scanner, this shift could be seen as a soft dimming near the forehead, the region that plans and supervises, and a glowing bloom deeper inside where emotion and motion intertwine. To describe it in symbols or anatomy would miss its poetry. It's more like a city at night when the offices close and the lights of cafes and music halls come alive. The strict rhythms of the day give way to jazz. When rappers performed memorized verses, their brains behaved like careful architects, symmetrical, efficient, tidy. But when they improvised, the pattern changed, connections loosened, new ones formed, and activity surged between regions that rarely spoke so freely. The brain wasn't breaking its rules, it was rewriting them in real time. There's something profoundly human about that. Beneath all our structure and self-consciousness lies a natural rhythm waiting to breathe. When you stop gripping too tightly, creativity flows not from effort, but from trust. Trust that the brain knows how to play. You might know this state by other names. Flow, in the zone, losing yourself. It's the same current that carries athletes, painters, cooks, even gardeners. Hours vanish. Decisions happen before you realise them, and the boundaries of time soften. It's not absence of thought, but thought transformed into instinct. In these moments, the mind stops asking, "Am I doing this right?" and simply does. The river finds its own path once the dams are lowered. There's a quiet irony here. The more we try to control creativity, the harder it becomes. Think of the writer staring at a blank page, paralysed by the pressure to produce something good. The critic in the mind shouts too loudly, drowning out the whisper of imagination. But the moment they stop forcing it, take a walk, breathe, let their attention drift. The idea arrives, soft and certain, as if it had been waiting all along. It's not magic, it's memory working in freedom. All those practiced patterns, years of language and rhythm, have been stored like water behind a dam. Creativity is simply the opening of the gates. This is why so many artists describe inspiration as something they receive rather than generate. They say the song came through. They're not from them. Neuroscience supports that feeling. In the flow state, awareness narrows until even self-consciousness fades. The story of me takes a brief rest, and the brain's ancient networks guide the body with unbroken grace. You've likely felt this in smaller ways, while humming absent-mindedly and realizing you've composed a melody, or while cooking and tasting instinctively without measuring. In those moments, the inner supervisor is napping, and something wordless moves through you, gentle and effortless. There's freedom in knowing that mastery doesn't always mean control. Sometimes it means trusting the systems beneath awareness, the muscles, habits, and intuitions that know their craft. The prefrontal monitor that watches and corrects is invaluable, but it's not meant to rule forever. It's like a teacher who must one day let the student take the stage. The paradox of creativity is that surrender brings clarity. The less you try to steer, the more gracefully the current carries you. And the music of that current, whether in freestyle rhyme or painting or simply living, is the mind's oldest joy. So tonight, if your thoughts feel tangled, imagine the inner critic laying down its clipboard, stretching and drifting into a light doze. Let rhythm take the wheel for a while. You might be surprised at where it leads. Not chaos, but a kind of order only freedom can create. And as we drift further into this quiet rhythm, our story moves toward the spaces where flow meets fear, where performance trembles between mastery and collapse, and where balance is found not in gripping tighter, but in trusting the dance to carry you forward. Picture a tightrope walker high above a quiet crowd. The rope sways gently in the wind, one foot in front of the other. Below, a hush, the collective breath of hundreds of people held at once. The walker's balance looks effortless, but it's an effort of a different kind. Not control, but trust. Every movement depends on surrendering to motion, not fighting it. Too much tension, and the rope stiffens. Too much relaxation, and gravity takes the lead. True balance, like mastery, lives in the middle, the space between fear and flow. The same fragile balance exists inside your mind. It's the space between thinking and doing, between holding on and letting go. When you enter that place, time softens. The body remembers what to do before you can name it. The mind, for once, listens instead of commands. Scientists studying this state sometimes call it the flow condition, but that phrase feels too clinical for something so alive. Flow isn't an event, it's an atmosphere. It's the feeling of being both participant and witness, where skill and instinct meet in harmony. You've felt it before, running until the rhythm of your feet becomes music, painting until your hand seems to move without permission, losing yourself in a song until even the idea of you fades into vibration. The body and brain in flow behave differently than in ordinary states. The inner supervisor, the same mental voice that double-checks, critiques and second-guesses, takes a gentle step back. Activity in the regions responsible for self-monitoring grows quiet, while communication between sensory and motor systems intensifies. It's as though the orchestra no longer waits for the conductor's signal, but listens directly to the beat of the drum. This temporary quieting of self-awareness is sometimes called transient hyperfrontality, but we can leave that phrase behind and simply call it what it feels like: the mind unclenching. When the inner hands release their grip, movement becomes graceful. The brain, free from overcorrection, allows well-trained networks to work as they were designed to. Fast, fluid, precise. You can see it in athletes who make the impossible look easy. The basketball player whose hand releases the ball in perfect arc, guided by countless hours of muscle memory. The surfer who seems to dance with the wave instead of fighting it. Ask them how they did it, and most will smile and shrug. "I don't know," they'll say. "I just did." That's not modesty, it's truth. In flow, knowledge moves deeper than words. The body acts as one seamless system, guided by years of practice and the trust that those lessons will rise when needed. Thinking too much would break the rhythm. Overthinking a free throw, they say, is the surest way to miss it. Fear is the shadow of this state, the voice that whispers, "What if I fall?" It waits at the edge of every performance, every leap into uncertainty. A musician who hesitates before a solo, a student frozen before an exam, an actor forgetting their line. Each has felt fear reclaim the space that flow once filled. But fear is not the enemy. It's the guardian of skill. It reminds you of the stakes, sharpening focus. The secret is not to silence fear, but to make it part of the music, another rhythm within the larger one. When fear overwhelms, control tightens. You can feel it physically. Muscles stiffen, breath shortens, thoughts loop. The world shrinks to a single anxious point. Flow disappears because attention has narrowed too much. But when you breathe, when you let awareness widen just enough, control softens into trust again. The hands loosen, the rope steadies, the walker moves forward. It's easy to mistake flow for recklessness, as though it were a state of thoughtless abandon. But true flow requires deep preparation. It grows from repetition, discipline, and the patience to practice until knowledge becomes instinct. Only then can the conscious mind afford to rest. It's not laziness, it's mastery learning when to step aside. Think of a pianist who has practiced scales until they are as natural as breathing. During a performance, they aren't calculating notes, they're feeling them. The conscious mind watches, perhaps smiling faintly, as the hands tell their story. The art is not in controlling every note, but in trusting the invisible architecture built from years of learning. This pattern extends beyond performance. You've probably experienced flow while driving a familiar road, your thoughts elsewhere until you arrive safely, surprised at how smoothly it went. Or while cooking, where the sizzle of the pan and the scent of garlic weave you into a trance. In those moments, you've entered the same delicate balance, skill meeting surrender. Life often moves like this, alternating between moments of deliberate effort and moments of release. The art lies in knowing which is needed. Grip the rope too tightly and it trembles. Loosen too much and it slips. True mastery in art and in living is the ability to adjust that tension, to hold on just enough to stay grounded while letting go enough to stay free. Even meditation, that quiet practice of stillness, is a kind of flow. People think it means forcing the mind to stop thinking, but it's really the opposite, allowing thoughts to pass without clutching them. The breath moves on its own. The heart keeps time. The watcher within relaxes and awareness widens like a lake settling after wind. It's strange that freedom feels most real when we stop trying to grasp it. The more we chase control, the more it slips away like water in a clenched fist. But when we open the hand, when we trust the rhythm already moving through us, control returns, not as command, but as harmony. So tonight, if you find your thoughts rushing, if your day has been a string of effort and noise, try loosening the grip a little. Let your breathing guide you. You don't need to direct every moment. You only need to let the practiced parts of yourself, the wise, quiet systems beneath awareness, do what they have always known how to do. Freedom perhaps doesn't mean mastering the world around you. It means learning the art of moving with it, of meeting each moment as it comes, without fear of falling or need for perfection. Flow is not escape. It's participation without resistance. And as we drift along this gentle current of understanding, our story now returns to the mind itself, to the parliament of voices that make every choice you've ever called your own. They vote, they argue, they reconcile, and somehow out of their noise emerges the harmony you call control. It's time to step inside that quiet government within. If you could listen to your brain as it makes a decision, it wouldn't sound like a single voice. It would sound like a parliament, a quiet government of countless delegates, all whispering, arguing and negotiating within the vast chamber of your skull. Every movement, every choice, every feeling is the result of that ongoing debate. There's no king at the centre, no president issuing commands. Instead, your mind functions more like a democracy of specialists. One region remembers, another feels, another plans, another watches. The votes happen not once, but millions of times per second. Most are small, decisions about how much to move a finger, where to shift your eyes, whether to lean forward or stay still. A few are momentous, whether to forgive, to speak, to stay, to change. For centuries, people imagined the self as a captain steering the ship of the body. But neuroscience paints a gentler picture. There is no captain at all, only a crew constantly adjusting the sails. The illusion of unity comes from their coordination. Like an orchestra tuning itself, the system keeps adjusting until the dissonance fades. You can feel this inner parliament at work every day. When you stand at the crossroads of a decision, part of you wants one thing, another part hesitates. One voice says, "Be bold," another says, "Be careful." Sometimes the debate is brief, and a conclusion feels sudden, as though it arrived from nowhere. But in truth, it was negotiated, an invisible consensus reached within the hum of your neurons. Emotions vote too. The limbic members of the assembly, older, more primal, speak with passion. Memory weighs in with precedent, recalling past mistakes or triumphs. Logic argues its case methodically, while habit quietly raises its hand, reminding everyone of what has worked before. The result is not a perfect democracy, but a coalition, temporary and fluid. That coalition is what you experience as control. It's the agreement of many voices saying, for this moment, this is the way forward. And yet, like any government, it can be swayed. When you're tired or hungry, the emotional party grows louder. When you're focused, the rational delegates hold more ground. When love enters the chamber, everything else grows quiet. This isn't chaos, it's harmony through negotiation. The brain's beauty lies in its adaptability, the ability to shift power between systems depending on the context. A sudden danger calls the emotional cabinet into emergency session. A complex puzzle invites the analyst to take over. Even in stillness, subcommittees continue to deliberate. How fast to breathe, when to blink, how to keep balance. It's humbling to realise that the you feel is not a single entity, but a chorus. When we say, "I've changed my mind," it's literally true. A different coalition has taken office. And just as societies thrive on cooperation, so too does the mind. If one faction dominates too long, emotion without reason, logic without empathy, imbalance follows. The orchestra detunes, the parliament fractures. Mental health, at its heart, is the art of maintaining dialogue between these inner voices. You might think of meditation, therapy, or even quiet reflection as sessions of this parliament made visible. When you sit in stillness, you're allowing the delegates to speak one at a time instead of all at once. You notice the anxious voice, the hopeful one, the tired one, and by listening without judgment, you bring order to the room. The act of noticing is itself a form of governance. Understanding this inner parliament also invites compassion for others. When someone lashes out, hesitates, or makes a baffling choice, it's easy to see them as willful or wrong. But remember, their decision too is the outcome of a complex debate, shaped by experiences, memories, hormones, fatigue, and fear. Their government meets under different weather, different histories. Realizing this doesn't excuse harm, but it explains the chaos of being human. Even your habits are small bureaucrats of their own. They don't wait for debate, they act by routine, freeing the higher assemblies to focus elsewhere. Most of the time they serve you well, brushing teeth, locking doors, saying thank you. But sometimes they pass outdated laws, and it takes conscious effort to repeal them. Change, in this view, is less a revolution than a patient rewrite of policy. In moments of clarity, when emotion, reason, memory and instinct all vote together, you feel calm. The noise quiets. The chamber stands in agreement. That sensation, the brief stillness of mind, is what we often mistake for control. But it's really harmony. The government within you has found alignment, if only for a moment. You can learn to cultivate that harmony. It doesn't require power, just attention. Listening to your thoughts instead of fighting them is like letting each delegate finish their speech. Eventually, a pattern emerges. Some voices are louder than they should be. Others have been ignored. With awareness, you can redistribute attention, giving empathy more votes, quieting the old fears, inviting curiosity to speak again. This is what growth truly means. Not becoming someone new, but changing how your inner parliament governs itself. As you mature, some committees merge, others dissolve. The debates grow more civil. The emotional members still speak passionately, but now they share the floor. The wisdom of the system lies not in silencing chaos, but in learning to orchestrate it. And perhaps, when you look at others, at society itself, you can see the same pattern reflected outward. Nations, families, communities, each a web of inner parliaments interacting with countless others. The struggles for understanding, for compromise, for balance. They're not flaws of humanity, but mirrors of how the brain itself survives. So when you feel conflicted or uncertain, remember, indecision is not weakness, it's democracy at work. The mind is voting. Give it time to reach a consensus, and when the votes align, when every voice, from the emotional to the rational, hums in quiet agreement, that's the feeling you call peace. From here, our story will move toward its softest reflection, the realization that even the parts of you cannot see or control are still you. The unconscious mind, the quiet machinery beneath thought, is not a stranger. It is part of the same parliament, the silent foundation upon which all awareness stands. Picture yourself drifting at the edge of sleep. The room is dim, you're breathing slow, and thoughts dissolve into something softer, half memory, half dream. It's a familiar borderland, the place where awareness fades but life continues. Your heart still beats, lungs still rise and fall, your body keeps its delicate rhythm. You are not directing any of it, yet it unfolds perfectly. In that moment, you are both gone and utterly present, proof that much of who you are continues, beautifully without supervision. This is where our long journey circles back. The quiet recognition that control, as we imagine it, was never the whole story. The you that worries, decides, and narrates, the part that says I am in charge, is only one voice in a larger choir. Beneath it hum countless systems, each with their own wisdom. They are not lesser, they are ancient. They carry you through every breath, every heartbeat, every dream. We often speak of the unconscious as something hidden, mysterious, or separate. But perhaps it's not another world at all, merely the deeper layers of this one, like the ocean beneath its surface, unseen yet continuous. When you look out at the waves, you never doubt that the water below is part of the same sea. Consider how many miracles unfold each moment without your notice. Your eyes adjust to light, your balance recalibrates as you shift in your chair, your immune cells patrol like tiny guardians. Somewhere inside, enzymes repair strands of DNA, neurons whisper across microscopic gaps, and your stomach measures the chemistry of what you've eaten. These aren't unconscious acts. They're unconscious intelligence. The body doesn't sleep just because awareness drifts. It keeps writing the symphony, and it isn't only biology. Many of your best thoughts begin below awareness too. You struggle with a problem, give up, go for a walk, and suddenly the answer arrives. It feels as though it dropped from nowhere, but the truth is that your deeper mind was still working, quietly rearranging the pieces until they fit. You might call this intuition, the elegant handshake between the seen and unseen parts of thought. It's not magic, it's efficiency. Your brain simply moves faster when it doesn't have to narrate itself. Awareness slows things down, like typing with one hand while the other holds a flashlight. The unconscious, by contrast, is the full orchestra playing in the dark, trusting the score it already knows. And yet, we rarely thank it. We praise our conscious triumphs, the essay written, the song composed, the problem solved. But we forget the silent foundation beneath. The unconscious doesn't seek applause. It doesn't speak in words. Its language is rhythm, emotion, and pattern. It hums beneath everything you do, a background melody that makes the song of self possible. Throughout our exploration, we've followed that melody, from the half-waking world of sleepwalking to the silence of anesthesia, through the split-brain dialogues, the orchestra of emotions, and the fragile illusion of agency. And here at the end, all those threads weave together into one realization. You're not a driver gripping the wheel. You're the entire vehicle, its hum, its motion, its momentum through the road of time. Control was never the point. Harmony was. The brain's architecture proves it. No single center rules the rest. No homunculus sits behind the eyes pulling levers. Awareness is a pattern, a glow that spreads when the network is in tune. When one region falters, others adapt. When you lose consciousness, the connections fade like lights dimming across a city grid. Yet even then the power remains. The city does not die. It rests. Some might find this humbling, even unsettling, that you are less commander than collaboration. But there's comfort here too. You're never truly alone within yourself. Every heartbeat is a vote of confidence from a billion cells working in unison. Every thought is a ripple across countless unseen exchanges. Even what you call free will fit into this pattern. Choices emerge not from a throne, but from a network in conversation with its body, its history and its surroundings. The unconscious is not your shadow, it's your roots. It keeps you upright while you reach toward light. Perhaps this is why letting go feels so good, because it allows the deeper self to take the reins again. When you dance or paint or drift into laughter, you're letting the conscious mind rest while the unconscious does what it's always done, guide you through motion and emotion with effortless precision. It's a reunion more than a surrender. So much of life's anxiety comes from trying to control what was never meant to be controlled. Breath, time, thought, other people. But if you listen closely, you can feel that quiet intelligence reminding you, you don't have to hold everything. You were built to flow. You were built to trust. Imagine your mind as a great river. On the surface, awareness glimmers, quick, reflective, always moving. Beneath it, deep currents carry you forward. They don't ask for attention, yet they never stop. Even when you sleep, even when you forget, the river flows. This understanding doesn't dissolve the self, it deepens it. You're not less you because your actions arise from unseen processes. You're more a collaboration of light and shadow, conscious and unconscious, reason and rhythm. The miracle isn't that you think, it's that all these layers harmonize enough for thought to exist at all. So, as this journey nears its end, pause for a moment and notice how much of you is already doing the work of living. Your lungs, your heart, your hidden networks of calm and care. You're carried not by control but by design, an elegant balance millions of years in the making. And perhaps that's what it means to find peace, not mastering the mind, but befriending it. Not ruling the unconscious, but listening to its steady hum and knowing it has never once stopped moving in your favour. Now, as the music of this exploration fades into quiet, let yourself rest in that knowledge. You don't need to steer. You're already being carried. You are the rhythm and the rest, the thought and the silence, the voice and the breath between words. And as always, thank you for drifting here with me, for sharing this little piece of stillness in the endless current of thought. If your eyes are closing, let them. If your mind wanders, let it drift. Everything that needs to keep going already knows how. Sleep peacefully wherever and whenever you are. The quiet government within will keep watch,